Deforestation is a known issue plaguing our world. All the time, you hear about forests being sheared down and global temperatures rising. But is that really all there is to the issue? First, and what is seen as often the most glaring issue, climate change. As you may have learned in some of the first science classes you've probably taken, plants, like trees, convert the air's carbon dioxide into oxygen and release it back into the air. How does this affect climate, though?
When you cut down huge amounts of forest, it accelerates climate change. And we're all very aware these days of climate change, right? And so green plants make their own food through photosynthesis. They take carbon dioxide from the air and sunlight, energy from the sun, and they mix it all up in the process we know as photosynthesis, and they make food for the plant. And then as a result, they release oxygen. So, what's one of the primary greenhouse gases that leads to global warming? Carbon dioxide, exactly. So, if we eliminate a whole bunch of forest areas, there's that much less carbon dioxide being pulled from the atmosphere. And combine that with all the CO2 that we as humans are generating through our activities, and that accelerates global warming, it accelerates the greenhouse gases.
Not to mention, clear-cutting leaves areas open to erosion and flood risk, deepening the damages caused. Of course, we can't forget that some things live in trees, animals. What happens when animals are forced out of their homes? What could happen?
There's a very delicate ecosystem when deforestation happens. It opens up the way for invasive plants and species overall to come into vulnerable areas and harm native habitat and wildlife, so it can have a pretty negative effect on the environment.
Invasive species, if you didn't know, often chase out and kill native species, and forests contain about 60,000 different native species. And among those are what's estimated to be about 70 to 80% of all of Earth's land animals. But of course, logging companies replant the forests. But how do they do that exactly?
A lot of the forest companies, the timber companies, they say, oh, well, we plant more trees than we cut down. And it's not really a fair argument because you have an intact, diverse, biodiverse forest habitat with many, many, many species of trees and many species of understory plants and ground plants and birds and mammals and amphibians and reptiles and insects. All these, it's an incredibly biodiverse area. But if they cut everything down, they might plant more trees than they cut down, but all the trees they're planting are trees that they then can harvest again in the.
So, even if the forests are replanted, the animals living there are still being threatened and thrown into transformed woods without nearly all the plants that they had before. What does that really mean for the animals then?
One of the primary effects of deforestation that most people think of is the loss of biodiversity. So, biodiversity essentially how many species of plants and animals there are in a particular area. Okay. And all those plants and animals require specific habitat. And if the forests are taken away, those species that require forest habitat as their home, they have no place to go. And so the more forest habitat that we lose, the more threatened and endangered species we end up having because they are losing their habitat. And if you look at all the threatened and endangered species on the planet, the number one cause for them becoming threatened and endangered is loss of habitat.
So, deforestation doesn't really even out for wildlife. In fact, it's a negative impact from every angle. Why is this even happening at this point?
Somewhere between the spectrum of economic development, resource extraction, and just plain profiteering or greed, not understanding how fragile our earth and our ecosystems are.
And there you have it. The main reason for deforestation lies in money. Think of housing. Houses often use wood and need space. What does clearing a forest supply you with? The answer is obvious. In all this, one has to ask, where will this road lead us?
I don't want to paint just a total doom and gloom picture here. It's like, oh my gosh, we're all doomed and it's the apocalypse because all the forests are being cut down. There are a lot of groups, a lot of conservation organizations, a lot of governmental agencies that are really doing their best to minimize the amount of deforestation happening in different areas because they're relying on information from a lot of scientists about the negative impacts of that. And so, if deforestation continues to happen unchecked, the effects could be catastrophic for civilization. Um, there, I think, have been instances in the past where there have been pretty thriving civilizations, but once they cut down all the trees to build and to burn, um, the civilization collapsed.
Of course, there is a lighter road to take. Whichever path we lean towards is up to everyone. Please make the right choice. Please help save our forests.